What is up, fellow Titans? Welcome to my Titans Season 4, Episode 1 breakdown. I'm going to be uploading my Episode 2 Mother Mayhem episode breakdown in a whole separate video, so keep an eye out for that. But the time is finally here. We get to break down Titans, recap the episode as always, go through it, discuss it, and as usual, I'll save the more review segment till the very end of this video. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. We have got a lot to talk about, especially with that ending. So go ahead and like this video. If you do go on to enjoy it, it really helps me out, and it means a lot if you subscribe to the channel, as it helps the channel grow quite a bit. So let's dive right into the beginning of this episode, and I really enjoyed how it picked up. We started off with the Titans bowling, and what's really interesting about this season is that it picks more or less directly up from the end of season 3. This is only a few days afterwards. I like the foundation they give to Corey with this conversation with Dick, saying that she feels free for the first time in a long time, and it's kind of true with regards to her arcs right up until season 3. First of all, it was about coming to Earth to kind of stop Raven. Then season 2, there's a bit of Tamaran destiny there. Her sister Blackfire comes in, or was teased in season 2. And then in season 3, the whole like being really beholden to Tamaran and whatnot has kind of been dished off onto Blackfire. So now, just kind of like Starfire's powers being a blank slate for her, albeit they've been there the whole time, she's kind of looking at everything, being like, you know what? I get to really decide what I want to do right now. This is my family, as I always kind of say, and as you guys say as well, they're the Mama and Papa Bear. And overall, this beginning scene just gives off a really fun, positive family vibe to the Titans that I think the show has sorely been missing. Sure, we've got it few and far between, but this season, even beyond this episode, episode 2, that certainly does, as I said in my no spoilers review, really capitalize on the team-driven dynamic. Now, when they were bowling as well, we got a little semi-transformation for Ryan Potter's Beast Boy, where a little freaking octopus arm comes out to aid him, and this is when Dick gets a call from Bruce Wayne. Now, just to let you know, I have no idea what Bruce is exactly doing right now. Even well into episode 5, this isn't major spoilers or anything. It's just that this is more or less, including the line about Lex Luthor later with regards to Bruce Wayne, the only stuff that we get about Bruce Wayne so far, which is probably a positive for a lot of people because they feel like Titans was more of a Bat family show just with a few Titans characters, whereas this season, it's really not that. Bruce is just, I guess, chilling in Gotham as of the end of season 3. But Dick says it's about Metropolis, and that Bruce and he have been talking about Connor going to meet his dad, so he made a few calls and Superman wants to meet him. This is where we get things starting to kick off here with Lex Luthor and the connection there that the trailer showed. So we have May Bennett, which is Mother Mayhem, saying, "Welcome to the ancient world, Mr. Luthor." And I love how we have Titus Welliver's Lex saying, "Let there be light." It makes me smile because, or laugh rather, it is a very Lex Luthor thing to say. He has a lot of power and gravitas, and he wants to kind of be like a god, like Superman, and there's even a couple of lines like this in a moment from now. So for him to say, "Let there be light," is, you know, obviously a bit of a reference to the whole godhood. And speaking of that godhood, it might not be for the typical reasons that Lex goes after it, because of what we learn he's dealing with this episode in his life, because May Bennett says, "The Temple of Azarath is now yours. When the ritual is done, your power will be greater than anyone else on Earth. Him too," which is obviously a reference to Superman. She says, "Soon the gods will know your name." And he says, "I can assure you, Miss Bennett, they already do." And considering that this Lex has been battling and trying to kill Superman for decades at this point in this Titans iteration of the DC universe, yeah, Superman knows who this guy is. So since Mother Mayhem, or should I just call her May Bennett for now, has brought everything to Lex up until this point with the Temple of Azarath, he lets her go. She says she's devoted over 5 years of her life to this project with regards to, I guess, getting it up to spec. But obviously, she's also there for somewhat other reasons, given that she is one of the main villains of this season. The Church of Blood will be rallying behind her. She interestingly says, "You're making a mistake. This power comes at a cost. Someone will have to pay." And that's when he says, "Someone always does." So you can look into this part of the dialogue as a bit of a link to why is Lex Luthor really, like as in really wanting to meet with Superboy. Despite what he says, this is kind of what I enjoy about this episode, and I know I'm already jumping to it. Despite what he says about not wanting to, you know, use Connor's genetic material, of which Dick warned him about, how Lex says he's already tried that, didn't work. That kind of adds this multifaceted aspect to Lex's motivations. It's not really truly clear, especially before it's even cut off before we really find out what Lex's motivations were. Well, like, was he telling the truth? Did he just want to get to know his son? It kind of seems like maybe he is telling the truth. He's realizing he's dying, he's exhausted a lot of options, but at the same time, he didn't exactly mention that there is also a ritual that can be done, as revealed here, of which would make him more powerful than Superman, and I guess the idea behind that is that hopefully it would avoid the kryptonite poisoning that he's dealing with. And as May Bennett says in this moment, someone has to pay. Lex replying, someone always does. Maybe he still intended for Connor Kent to take the brunt of that payment for when the ritual is done to ascend Lex to this most powerful being on Earth. Maybe that was the long term, but again, the depth of this story here with how we have those scenes unfold throughout the episode, Lex eventually meet Connor, going back to the main point, you never really find out, or should I say Connor doesn't. Like, you really truly don't know. You can speculate that Lex was gonna somewhat deceive Connor and actually eventually use him, even though he said that he'd already tried the genetic material but conveniently left out there is a little bit of a ritual that he can also do. It's left ambiguous, and I guess May Bennett, Mother Mayhem, as you know, the final scene in the episode, robs that opportunity from Connor for him to really know if his dad was as shady as everyone made him out to be, which he is, but is shady to him in terms of the father-son relationship. So up next, this is where we cut to Joseph Morgan, Sebastian, Sanger, and as I've said, and as you could maybe, I don't know if you could probably tell from just watching episode 1, but some of you may have seen episode 2 by now, I said that was a bit of a slow burner storyline. And one thing that I just want to kind of include here is in my no spoilers review, some users were saying that Titans usually starts off really strong in the first 5 episodes, which I tend to agree with. Then it might dip from there on out, so they're worried that the same thing would happen here. And I replied to one of those comments saying, well, the funny thing is, this season doesn't exactly strive to do what it did in the past 2 with kind of jam-packing the first 5 episodes with crazy things left, right, and center. Rather, it's more of a slow burner leading up to those more entertaining wham-smacking moments a little bit later on. So it's interesting to see, you know, this story unfold through things like Sebastian, seeing him at the very early, kind, good-willed nature version of him that he currently is, with us inevitably knowing will eventually be brother blood. So just to kind of leave that thought in some of your guys' heads if you were concerned about that, as you can tell, it's a bit of a slow burner, but that's not a bad thing. Again, sometimes if you burn bright, you burn way too fast, as previous seasons of Titans has done, so this one will slowly burn but get all the more brighter for a longer period of time, and when it's almost at the end of its candle wax in this weird ass analogy, it would be towards that part of the season where, excuse the pun here, mayhem will really ensue with not only Mother Mayhem but brother blood. But for now, we have Sebastian talking to his taxidermy animals about how he's invented something that will give millions of people all over the world hours of happiness and contentment. This is when we have a couple watching TV, and this is what I meant about one of the meta jokes, if you will. I mean, I could be reading too into it, admittedly, but we have them saying, I don't care about all these other characters, just give me the main cast. Yeah, I know, right? And make them kiss already. I do feel like that's a little bit of a writing joke with the writers team, just kind of bringing up what fans have maybe said about the show, just focus on the main cast, and also just make them kiss already, being maybe a reference to fans wanting that to happen with Dick Grayson and Corey. But this is when one of those creepy ass Church of Blood masked people murders the woman after stunning the man. Gotta love the little ree that the masked guy lets out. But after that happens, we get these scenes playing amongst each other. For example, Sebastian is working on his taxidermy, and then the eye of the animal just starts bleeding. It then cuts back to the Titans. Raven, with her magic of course, is picking up something dodgy that is happening, which is very interesting that it's not only affecting her, but whatever mystical stuff is going on right now is also clearly affecting Sebastian in a similar way. So when that cup spills, there's a bunch of blood. Obviously, Raven doesn't know exactly what this is, but this is the start of her picking up the trail of the Titans eventually going to unravel what the heck is going on here. So this is when the Titans arrive to the Star Labs in Metropolis, and if you've ever wondered what the DC Universe version of Titans is Superman would look like, this is the best I suppose you're gonna get. As they enter Star Labs, we have Tim Drake kind of explaining to the team what Star Labs is, but also we get cool little things in the hologram thing where it says that in this iteration, unlike our existence, even though I would like this to happen, or maybe not, just in case they decided to planet crack us or something, that 14,305 extraterrestrial species have made contact with Earth, which is pretty nuts, to be fair. Also, other cool little details with how long it takes Superman to fly to the sun, and it said that it takes 6 minutes. This is where we meet Bernard, and he is the director of special projects here at Star Labs. But unfortunately, Bernard reveals to Connor that Kal-El sends his regards, but unfortunately he was called away on urgent business. But he did leave him that letter that we saw and broke down from the New York Comic-Con booth of where they actually had the letter from Superman to Connor Kent. He also mentions, until then, follow Bernard. He has something to show you. It's what we do. And I kind of find it funny in a way that Superman's like, yeah, I'm going to flex and show my son what I can do. But no, really, it is just kind of showing Connor the potential of what maybe he can one day do just like Superman. Even though that is a very high bar to meet. But then we cut to Beast Boy, and Bernard says his days of stripping naked are finally over, and he's trying on the new suit, which is when he wakes up in a very red looking location with red skies, and you see a tree in the background, which again, this is all a big teaser and foreshadowing for Gar's storyline. But the thing is, in that moment of where he was kind of transported to this other place, you could say, he somewhat hulked out. He became a gorilla, a velociraptor, an armadillo, and it looks like things went pretty crazy. I do think it's a shame we didn't get some kind of shots of that. Now I know realistically this show wouldn't have literally shown the CGI of a velociraptor, a gorilla, like going around that room, but I do feel like they could have found creative ways of, amongst, you know, Beast Boy being in that red looking location, that they could have just done really quick edited burst shots. You know how sometimes trailers cut really fast to the black and then to the trailer, stuff like that. I feel like that would have been pretty cool. But don't worry, we are getting more Beast Boy transformations in this season. This is when Superboy gets to see the place of where Star Labs has this whole sector dedicated to studying his father. And that's when Dick and Connor are given some Clark Kent glasses, which allow them to kind of see like a VR space of exactly what Superman is doing. It kind of reminds me of like a NASA mission control room of when they're launching a flight up into space. But of course, seeing Connor wear these glasses was brilliant. Even Dick had to like take his off and give Connor a second look, and he's like, what? He's like, nothing. It's just a nice tribute to the Clark Kent side of things. Maybe it's a bit in some people's face, but obviously seeing Connor wear this, and you know, those slight little mannerisms, I guess you could say, that was subtly woven in there. Who knows, one day he could take inspiration from that. But yes, Superman is essentially casually preventing the collapse of a red dwarf star, saving an entire galaxy from destruction, which is a very Superman thing to do. And this is when we cut to Kori, and this is what I meant about the tease of her potential in my no spoilers review. She essentially obliterated this Promethium, which is the hardest substance known to man, and their lasers take a while to do it, but she did it much quicker. But apparently she has barely scratched the surface, with the lab tech assistant saying she's only used 8.1% of her total estimated kinetic output, which is just insane. The show is obviously gonna like release some kind of, I don't know, nuclear bomb version, 50% power release at some point later on in the season. Or you could argue that when you see that Mother Mayhem clip of her battling Mother Mayhem, that is why she was able to hold her off. So Kori could be very pivotal to combating the magic that Mother Mayhem wields. Then we have Bernard come over to Tim Drake and Dick, basically saying, yeah, you know, we've planned something special for you. He got a bit overexcited thinking it's the Robin suit, but as Dick says, and I do agree, by the way, you've been a Titan for 5 minutes. The reason why I say I do agree is because a lot of people out there who are maybe just only tuning into Titans, I've seen them say, why isn't, you know, Robin wearing the Robin suit? Well, again, he isn't trained, doesn't even know how to use a bow staff. I don't think, and I think it does at least make sense that you wouldn't just toss him into a Robin suit straight away. So I think there are logistics behind that. I think there's a very obvious arc there. He's gonna, you know, slowly but surely learn how to train with the bow staff, as Dick even said in this moment. And then, and this is no spoilers, by the way, I haven't seen anything like this, but I do think his story arc will peak at the episode 7 to 10-ish area of where he will get a Robin suit. Now, this is where we get a seed planted, obviously, with the romance of the comic or the source material between Bernard and Tim Drake. He's just like, should you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and he gives the card to Tim Drake, or his card. And even later on, we get another direct foreshadowing here of Raven being like, oh, that guy, huh? That guy at Star Labs, who's that? Now, the only weird thing about this that people have picked up is that I don't know how old Bernard is, but he's like the director of special operations or whatever they said at Star Labs. And we know for a fact that Tim Drake in season 3, as it's been stated, I believe, is 16 years old. And this season only takes place 3 days or so later. So I don't know if they're retconning his age, or if Bernard is meant to be like a progeny and actually much younger than James Scully is in real life. Maybe I'm overlooking something, but when you take that into account of what they are obviously trying to, show you between the lines of what is happening this season, it's just a bit strange when you think about it, because, in real life, James Scully is 30 years old. Obviously, I can understand that he might not be 30 years old in the show, but even if he isn't, he would still be well into his 20s, so yeah, you get my point. Don't really need to talk about it much more. Would love your thoughts on this. Now, the bus also gets a little bit of a retrofit in terms of Bruce Wayne. Thanks for saving Gotham. They put a car coming out from underneath it, but I have to admit, this is nitpicky, it's fair enough, but it's a bit of a TARDIS situation because the set that we see inside the Titans bus, how does that car go into it and then allow for that same room they have to walk around with that space? So again, it's bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside, I suppose. I guess Bruce Wayne tech, his buses are fitted with Doctor Who TARDIS tech. And so this is when the Titans are leaving Gotham. I'm sure a lot of us have seen this scene that was released quite a few times by now. And this is when Superboy gets whammied by Lex Luthor, which is also, the dialogue is completely stripped and taken from the 1978 Superman. Obviously a little bit edited. The original version is, I know it all seems a bit much, but how else was I going to get to meet you, Superman? So it's a nice reference that they include there with Titus Welliver's Lex in this iteration saying a very similar line. And the rest, as you already know, is to meet Lex at LexCorp Tower at 8 p.m. But Mum and Dad want to talk to Connor outside the bus about this, which again, I do love the Mum and Dad aspect to Corey and Dick. Dick is trying to hammer into Connor that Lex Luthor, even to Bruce Wayne, is the only man he was ever afraid of. But Connor's just like, Superman's not afraid of him, neither should I. And this is where they say that Lex has spent the past 40 years trying to kill Superman, which I guess could work. Titus Welliver is 60 years old, so I guess this Superman is also like 60-ish, because if he spent the past 40 years trying to kill Superman, that would put them back to kind of Smallville days, like with Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum's Lex. So he's been doing it ever since then. 4 decades, 40 years of trying to kill Superman, which is pretty nuts. But I would also like to say how this fits in nicely with all of the complaints that people kind of tend to have about Bruce Wayne or being Ian Glenn, is that superheroes have been around, at least in this iteration, this adaptation, for a long time. Ian Glenn's Batman is older, because quite simply, he is older. It's the same thing with Lex Luthor. 4 decades of trying to kill Superman. 4+ decades of Batman. So again, you may not like the casting. I personally do, of Batman, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Just trying to show you here, whilst we're talking about it, that in the Titans iteration of things, those big Justice League characters have been around for a while. When Dick Grayson was a kid in those flashbacks with a little mini Donna Troy as well, you had the Justice League down in the Batcave in that moment talking about the Joker killing a bunch of people. So yeah, it's been going on for a while. Starfire's like, maybe we should find out. Should we call him and ask for a quick chat? Dick's just like, that's not really my style. She's like, yeah, not really mine either. And that's when we get to see Corey's style of doing things. And this is what I mean in my no spoiler review with how Corey made me smile quite a lot this season of what I've seen so far. This is just brilliant. I personally really enjoyed it. She just completely walks into Lex's office in a bit of a corridor, I guess you could say, excuse the pun there, fight scene, knocking the living crap out of every single person who is guarding Lex Luthor. But what I also really liked with the direction, or should I say what Titus Welliver brought with this scene, is that he is a human as well, but he doesn't even so much as look once at what is happening. He's not remotely worried. And that's, I feel like, who Lex Luthor is and why I rate this Lex so highly, even though he's barely in this season, if you know what I mean, as I said in my no spoilers review. And by the way, I want to clear something up. I think some people got confused when I say he's the best Lex in years. They were like, I think Michael Rosenbaum might want to talk to you. I love Michael Rosenbaum's Lex. What I meant is, some of it was well over a decade ago. So Titus Welliver is the best Lex we've had in years in terms of literally movie DCEU Lex, and then literally CW's Lex. But in terms of Michael Rosenbaum, yeah, he is the OG. But Titus Welliver, my God, really, even though it's a very short and brief but memorable appearance, does a damn good job, I think, and I would love to know your thoughts on that. But you gotta love how Starfire digs into him when talking about Blackfire and how she spent her whole life getting denied, overshadowed, less than, and then she looks him up and down, and it's like, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Now, this is when we have Nightwing and Tim Drake in an opposite tower. Now, I understand why they might be up there to get a good signal, but just to kind of like look into the logistics of this a little bit more, I'm not sure why he was like dressed up as Nightwing unless he knew that ninjas would be sent after him, but I don't see how he could have known that because he was kind of surprised by the ninjas. So to kind of nitpick into this a little bit, I can understand the bug. They need to kind of be opposite in order to hack Lex Luthor's laptop and whatnot. And even if it was for backup reasons, I don't think Nightwing was going to grapple hook across to the tower, so we'd have had to gone all the way down and then run to the other tower. But really, it's fine. I'll put it down to that Dick Grayson just was being prepared just in case that people came after him when they were hacking the laptop. But meanwhile, with Raven, Gar, Superboy, they're in the Daily Planet archives trying to look up stuff on Lex Luthor. Also, we had Raven sensing something off. A little bit later, she finds a box on the floor that starts bleeding and then kind of gets snapped out of it by Gar, and just like, we should have never come back to Metropolis. I feel like something terrible is going to happen. We have a bit of a back and forth continue with Lex Luthor and Starfire talking about how he wants to give him the benefit of his knowledge and stuff, and then she's like, you just want to use him as your weapon. But this is again what I love about how Lex digs into Dick Grayson next, saying, isn't that exactly how you're using him, Richard? Hasn't Bruce taught you any other way? Now, obviously, this is a whole dig at the fact that Bruce, especially as shown in the adaptation of Titans, has used kids, Robins, as literal weapons, and it can be seen, and I think Slade Wilson in Season 2 had a similar argument with how, with his Titans team, he's kind of doing what the father did as well. Like, Dick is taking after Bruce, weaponizing kids in a team, but obviously it's not as black and white as that with Nightwing's way of doing things. But still, Lex uses that axe to grind that in a little bit more, sends the ninjas after him, says, this is me being gentle, and we get that fun ninja fight, of which again I thought the choreography was pretty decent. I did notice a scene, I don't know if this is in the scene of where it aired for you guys, of where they showed Tim Drake at that moment like smacking that ninja from behind with the bow staff, and then we see that scene from a different angle like 10 to 15 seconds later. So the cutting was a teeny bit weird there, but again, that's something that I don't think too many people would notice. But honestly, really enjoyed this. But I do feel like Tim Drake, it's a very lucky thing that he didn't die in this battle. Like, he is untrained, literally doesn't know how to use a bow staff. These are trained ninjas. I guess, you know, arguably the best that money could buy, considering it's Lex Luthor who hired them. And since he went 1v1 with them, again, with the way they filmed it, I suppose you could just say and put it down to that he got lucky. And so they successfully took the personal files, records, and whatnot, and going back to the Daily Planet, the other Titans learned that 18 months ago, the Luthor Foundation has been setting up all kinds of things. Well, that's when Dick comes in and says Lex Luthor is dying. He has 6 months to live, and what they extracted from the laptop revealed lots of files on all of this, visits to medical clinics all over the world. By the way, before anyone mentions it, don't have a problem with the fact that they managed to successfully retrieve those files from Lex's computer without a warning message popping up alerting Lex, because this is Wayne Tech, so I can buy that it did it discreetly. Now, that man that they didn't initially know the name of in all those photos, Starfire reveals is Arthur Holmwood, the world's leading expert in kryptonite poisoning. And yeah, Lex was diagnosed 2 years ago, likely due to, I don't know, trying to superfuel take down Superman with kryptonite, and eventually his exposure to it is now ultimately leading to his death. They do say karma's a bitch. And so after a little bit of another warning talk with Dick Grayson, this is when Superboy goes to see Lex Luthor at LexCorp Tower. And I like how Connor introduces himself as Connor Kent. And the reaction from Lex is brilliant. He was like, so you took his name. And there was a little bit of a sting in his reaction as well. He kind of was just looking off to the side, but trying to shake it off. Now, this is where we get a lot of what I went over earlier. So I don't want to like fully repeat myself in terms of like the whole ample supply of genetic material that he used to create Connor. He already had and tried to do that. So he technically disputes the idea of the Titans thinking that he's just getting Connor in to save himself. Although, again, everything I said earlier leading up into his death, you can see it how Connor never really will find out if he was still long-term deceiving him for a plan that Connor really wasn't in the know of, such as the ritual and what that could have meant and how someone has to pay him. That could have been Connor. I do feel like in the conversation of what happens next, they do course correct a little bit from season 2. And what I mean by this is Connor basically asks, why did you create me? And he says, I created you for one reason, to see my dream of becoming Superman. He did say, please understand, I realized years ago that, you know, essentially he himself couldn't actually become Superman. But this following line is what I mean. He says, so I went about achieving my personal dream the way men have since the beginning of humanity. I had a son. But again, if this was Lex's dream, going back to what I was kind of tackling with this course correction, would he really do all of this to just do what he did in season 2, basically mind hack Superboy to sell him off to the highest bidder as their muscle? And that, like, we can create a whole bunch of these, basically, and, you know, maybe we can sell even more. So do you see what I mean? I feel like that contradicts that. Not that I care, by the way, in terms of how this is revealed to be his dream and why he created Superboy, but I feel like that obviously, you can see through the writing here, wasn't the case at the time of season 2, because we literally had Mercy Graves put Connor up on a pedestal for Cadmus Labs saying, hey, people in other countries, do you want to buy Superboy? Clearly not Lex's dream at that point in time. But, you know, I guess we have to kind of forget about that. Towards the end of that conversation, Lex ultimately says, I don't want you to become me. I've already done that. What I want for you with all of your gifts is to know me. And with that knowledge, choose for yourself what and who you will be. Now, even though this has been cut off by his death, of which we need to talk about, this is still foreshadowing the arc that Connor has this season, like figuring out who he really is going to be. That will involve going down a couple of different paths. He asks him if he will stay. He says yes. And this is where things get interesting as well. He says, I have something I want to share with you. A project I have been working on. The reason why death can no longer be the foe I once thought to be. And this is quite transparent. So he's basically in this moment sharing, or is about to share with Connor, the Temple of Azarath thing, the whole ritual that May Bennett referred to, and how that will send Lex to be the most powerful being on Earth. And Lex says in this moment after that, but there's problems. My partners may have darker ideas than I do. I need your help. So he's also acknowledging that I kind of got into this deep with other people like May Bennett. They may have darker ideas than I do, so I need your help. But obviously that gets cut off by what happens. But I found it interesting. I found it interesting that this could be more evidence to how maybe Lex was being genuine. Because in this moment, as he said himself, a project I've been working on, the reason why death can no longer be the foe I thought it once would be. If he stayed alive, I assume he would have continued that conversation saying, well, yeah, Temple of Azarath, the reason why death wouldn't be the foe because essentially I kind of wanted to do this ritual. So if he's being that transparent, it does make you think, what was there any truth behind his motivations here with what he was telling Connor? But again, we'll never know, and I think that's what makes this so effective. So ultimately, Lex knows that Mother Mayhem, or May Bennett, is pretty shady. I do wonder if he's come to this conclusion since firing her, that my partners may have darker ideas than I do, because this might be her journal, and after flicking through it, he's like, oh, damn. But either way, this is where we cut to Sebastian coughing up blood. He then looks in the mirror, but in the mirror, we see a very Joker evil, smiling version of himself, which I think obviously is a bit of a shadowing for the person he might one day become. But you could also argue this could be creepily Mother Mayhem, since she's the one causing all of this behind the scenes, kind of like appearing in his form, smiling right back at him. Lex's eye starts to bleed. He starts coughing up blood, spewing it from his mouth. Meanwhile, Raven is connected to all this. She's screaming her head off, and Lex is literally puking up a snake. Connor lasers it, and Lex is there, dead, on the floor. Then we have Mother Mayhem smiling to herself, saying, you see, Mr. Luthor, someone always pays. So obviously May Bennett, even though she was working for Lex for the past 5 years, and she probably used him for his money to bring about whatever she needed to do to concoct her plans for the Church of Blood. Let's talk about this murder. I've got a feeling some people might react negatively to this and, talk about short but sweet. And to me, it sucks from the subjective standpoint in terms of it's such a shame that we can't see more of Titus Welliver's Lex Luthor because he was so good. But then again, if you remind yourself of what the plan is, like, he's not the main villain. This is what springboards the story off for Connor from here on out. The ambiguity surrounding I'll never know now what really was at the core of what my father and why my father wanted to see me. And Mother Mayhem took that away from me. Also, just acknowledging that Lex Luthor has been trying to kill Superman for 40 years already by this point. So in all kind of objective standpoints here, I don't think anyone should be like critically mad for like, why would they kill Lex Luthor? Ha ha ha. I can imagine these comments already. Titans already effed up. Like, they killed Lex Luthor. That's not, like, what kind of criticism is that? You might not like it personally because you might have wanted to see more. But technically, from the writing standpoint, I get why they did it. So let me know if you're a bit kind of underwhelmed by that in an understandable way, because maybe you would have liked to have seen more Lex. For me, it's kind of short but sweet. I understand it. I also do feel a similar way in how I would have liked to have seen more. But at the same time, it kind of is what it is. And, I understand why it happened to kind of springboard certain other storylines to go forth. If this was a Lex Luthor main villain season, then I'd get it, but clearly he isn't, as I've already stated. So that's where the episode leaves off. Mother Mayhem clearly behind that. We're going to learn a bit more about her and what's going on there. And as for like the whole review aspect of this episode, I can't lie to you. I feel like this was a pretty solid first episode, even though the premiere piloty of season 4, if you will, was the first 2. But if you've already seen episode 2, no spoilers, don't worry if you haven't got round to that yet, because this is the episode 1 video. As you can see with what I've been saying, maybe it's not fixed everything for you or whatever, but this season clearly has a genetic makeup change from their usual approach. Things are very team-driven. Things are good between the Titans. There's no BS drama there. The character setups for what's going on with Beast Boy going to that other place is pretty solid. We've got a slow cooker with Tim Drake and his training. Superboy has had a massive chunk this episode, of which is going to ripple throughout the season. The main villain has been nicely teased and set up. Nightwing is the leader and character he should have been for a long time, and if you haven't got a true sense of that already, you will as the episodes unfold. So for me, honestly, and I'm really trying to remove my bias from the show here, as I try to do as a reviewer. Even if I have bias, I try and look at it as objective as I can. Other than the criticisms I have mentioned, I feel like it still gets a thumbs up from me overall as a fairly solid foundation for season 4. Let me know what you thought. I know this was a long ass video, but I wanted to do a deep dive. So again, if you've seen this episode, let me know your thoughts on episode 1. React to Lex Luthor's death. What do you think of other things that are happening in the episode? What do you think is going to go on with Sebastian? And as that unfolds, it's kind of weird because I know a lot of you have probably seen episode 2 by now, but if you're watching this as it goes live, my episode 2 breakdown will be up 3 to 4 or so hours after this one, separate videos, and then as always, it's going to be a weekly release from there on out. So like this video if you did enjoy it, my fellow Titans. Do consider subscribing for more videos like this. I've got some special things cooking up for the off season, of which, I don't want to say what they are right now, but they're looking pretty damn decent, so look forward to that as well when we visit the break in between December and January. But until my next episode breakdown, which is a few hours from where you're watching right now, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Titans in the next video. Goodbye.